I'll take care of this one.
Hello, Hot Pants. I don't suppose you have a driver's license tucked down in there somewhere, do you?
What if one of the wildest, most chaotic comedies ever made was actually based on something even crazier in real life? The Cannonball Run wasn't just a slapstick car chase with big names. It was born from illegal races, on-set madness, and behind-the-scenes moments you were never meant to see. From near-death stunts to mistaken identities and real-life protests, the truth behind this film is wilder than the movie itself.
Okay, I'm ready now. Here we go.
The Cannonball Run is remembered as a fast-paced, chaotic film packed with stars and outrageous stunts. But what many people don't realize is that the madness on screen was inspired by real events, ones that were arguably even more extreme than what made it into the movie. This wasn't just a Hollywood idea cooked up in a studio. The film was based on something very real, very illegal, and very daring. Before we go any further, here's your reminder to subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on your daily doses TV bloopers. Back in 1971, Brock Yates, an experienced motoring journalist and editor at Car and Driver magazine, came up with an idea that pushed the limits of the law and public safety. Frustrated by what he saw as unnecessary restrictions on driving speeds in the United States, Yates joined forces with Dan Gurney, a respected race car driver, to make a bold statement. They decided to drive from New York to California as fast as possible, not for money, fame, or even personal achievement, but as a protest against the national speed limit. At the time, the US government had enforced a 55-mile-per-hour national speed limit, citing reasons like fuel conservation and road safety. Yates didn't buy into the argument. He believed that skilled drivers could manage high speeds responsibly and safely, and that the government's rules were overly cautious and limiting. So instead of just writing about it in a magazine column, he turned the protest into action. The journey began in Manhattan and ended in Redondo Beach, California. Yates and Gurney completed the coast-to-coast drive in just under 36 hours. They didn't seek permission, there was no official approval, and they didn't warn the police in advance. They simply got in the car and drove, dodging traffic laws, staying under the radar, and relying on speed, stamina, and a bit of luck. In interviews later on, Gurney joked that they had to stop only once, to sleep for a few minutes in a hotel before getting back on the road. Although the original run was meant as a one-off, the impact was immediate. Word spread quickly among motoring enthusiasts and adrenaline junkies. What started as a rebellious protest soon turned into a movement. Over the next few years, 5 more underground races followed, all modeled on the same idea: drive across the country as fast as possible with no official sanction, no rules, and no safety measures in place. These weren't just weekend hobbyist drives. The races attracted serious drivers from all over the country, some of them professionals, others simply obsessed with speed. People arrived in everything from Ferraris to heavily modified American muscle cars. It wasn't unusual for some teams to come up with creative ways to avoid police interference, often bending the rules of disguise and deception. One of the most talked about examples came from a team that entered the race in an actual ambulance. This wasn't a film stunt. It happened during one of the real Cannonball runs in the late 1970s. The team equipped the ambulance with forged medical documents, working sirens, flashing lights, and even wore authentic-looking medical uniforms. Their plan was simple: pretend they were on a medical emergency and hope law enforcement would wave them through. Surprisingly, the strategy worked more often than not. Police would see the flashing lights, hear the sirens, and pull over to let them pass, not realizing they were helping a team compete in an illegal race across the country. The fake medical operation was pulled off so well that it didn't raise suspicion until after the race ended. It became one of the most legendary moments in Cannonball history, and that same ambulance would later go on to play a big role in the 1981 movie. The real Cannonball races had no central organization, no insurance, and no official timing system beyond handwritten logs and word of mouth. Drivers operated on trust, and the shared thrill of pushing boundaries. There were no formal safety measures. In fact, many of the cars weren't even fitted with the kinds of safety equipment that would be considered standard for long-distance driving today. The only rule, if it could be called that, was to reach the destination first, no matter what it took to get there. These races weren't entirely without risk. In some cases, drivers were caught speeding and arrested. In others, cars broke down or got into accidents. But that didn't stop people from joining. For those involved, the risk was part of the appeal. It was a direct challenge to authority and a celebration of the open road, something that seemed to tap into a uniquely American idea of freedom and defiance. The events gained a cult following, particularly among motoring fans who saw the Cannonball as a symbol of rebellion. Car magazines began covering the races in coded language, avoiding details that could get participants in trouble. Yates himself published several articles that walked a fine line between journalism and confession, giving readers a glimpse into the wild world of cross-country speedruns without giving away too much. Eventually, the Cannonball Run as a real race came to an end, at least in its original form. The risks grew too large, the media attention too intense, and the consequences too real. But by then, the legend was already well established, and Hollywood took notice. When it came time to make a film inspired by these events, Yates was brought on board as a writer and consultant. The 1981 movie The Cannonball Run, directed by Hal Needham and starring Burt Reynolds, Dom DeLuise and Farrah Fawcett, among others, was a fictionalized take on what had once been real. Though the film played it for laughs and leaned heavily into slapstick comedy, the roots were undeniably grounded in something very real and very dangerous. And you indeed you. Interestingly, Brock Yates didn't just help create the movie, he also appeared in it. He played a small background role as one of the race officials, a subtle nod to his real-life role as the originator of the Cannonball. It's the kind of hidden detail that only sharp-eyed fans would catch, but it's fitting. After all, without him, none of it, neither the illegal races nor the chaotic film that followed, would have existed. The story of the real Cannonball Run adds a completely different layer to the film. It wasn't just a comedy about people driving fast. It was based on a true underground culture that challenged authority, tested limits, and pushed the boundaries of what was possible on public roads. In that way, The Cannonball Run is more than just a film. It's a strange but fascinating piece of motoring history that captures a moment when speed, protest, and entertainment collided in a way no one expected. Burt Reynolds was the face of The Cannonball Run. At the time, he was one of the most bankable stars in Hollywood, known for action comedies like Smokey and the Bandit, which also featured fast cars and rebellious charm. On paper, The Cannonball Run seemed like a perfect fit, but Reynolds later admitted he had serious regrets about doing the film. He went as far as calling it one of the worst choices of his acting career. So why did he agree to do it in the first place? The answer lies in his friendship with director Hal Needham. Needham had been a stuntman before moving into directing, and he and Reynolds had worked together on several previous films. The two trusted each other, and when Needham pitched the idea of a star-studded road comedy, loosely based on the real Cannonball races, Reynolds didn't hesitate. He signed on, believing it would be another fun, action-packed success. But once filming started, it became clear that the film was going in a different direction than Reynolds expected. He wasn't thrilled with the script, which he felt was disorganized and overly silly. In interviews years later, he admitted that he mainly took the job for the paycheck and to support his friend. He also suggested that he never thought the film would be taken seriously or remembered for long. Despite his doubts, the film ended up being a massive box office hit and became a cult favorite over the years. Ironically, a project Reynolds didn't believe in ended up being one of the roles that audiences remember most. While Reynolds was having second thoughts about the film, one of his co-stars was dealing with an entirely different kind of confusion. Farrah Fawcett, best known for her role in Charlie's Angels, signed on thinking The Cannonball Run would be a romantic road movie with dramatic elements. After reading the script and seeing references to fast cars and travel, she believed the tone would be closer to a serious drama with some action. No one told her it was meant to be a comedy. That misunderstanding led to a strange experience on set. When Fawkes arrived, she quickly noticed that things didn't line up with what she had imagined. Dean Martin turned up wearing a priest's outfit, clearly in high spirits and already laughing through his lines. Sammy Davis Jr., also dressed as a priest, was cracking jokes and improvising. The atmosphere was more like a party than a film shoot. Still convinced that the film was supposed to be serious, Fawcett continued playing her scenes straight. It wasn't until the film premiere that she realized what the movie really was. Sitting in the cinema, watching the audience erupt with laughter, it finally hit her. The Cannonball Run was a full-blown comedy. Despite the mix-up, many viewers agree that her straight performance actually worked in the film's favor. Surrounded by chaos and over-the-top antics, her serious tone added a kind of contrast that made the funny moments even funnier. Casting for the film had its own share of unexpected twists. Sammy Davis Jr., who ended up being one of the standout characters, wasn't originally supposed to be in the movie at all. The role he eventually played was meant for Don Rickles, a well-known comedian. But when Rickles dropped out at the last minute, the team needed a replacement, and fast. Sammy Davis Jr. was brought in with very little time to prepare. Despite that, he jumped into the role with enthusiasm and completely made it his own. Dressed as a priest and paired with Dean Martin, the two quickly found a rhythm that felt natural and entertaining. Their chemistry on screen was so strong that it felt like they'd been performing together for years. Sammy's quick wit, charm, and comic timing turned a backup role into one of the film's most memorable parts. Unlike many of the other actors who stuck to the loose script, Sammy and Dean improvised most of their scenes. The director saw that something special was happening and decided not to interfere. Instead of keeping things tightly scripted, he let the two entertainers bounce off each other and have fun with their roles. The result was some of the most spontaneous and genuinely funny moments in the entire movie. However, their improvisation wasn't always planned or entirely sober. Reports from the set suggest that Martin and Davis weren't just pretending to be drunk for the sake of the characters. They were often actually drinking during filming. The drinks they held in scenes were real, and their slurred lines and laughter weren't always part of the act. It gave the film a loose, unpredictable energy that you couldn't fake. And while it may not have followed traditional filmmaking rules, it ended up contributing to the film's chaotic charm. Roger Moore's role in the Cannonball Run also brought unexpected consequences, but for a different reason. Moore played a character who was essentially a parody of James Bond, a wealthy man who acted like a secret agent, complete with tuxedos, women, and a flashy sports car. Audiences enjoyed the tongue-in-cheek performance, especially since Moore was the official Bond actor at the time, but not everyone was amused. MGM Studios, which owned the rights to the James Bond franchise, wasn't happy with the portrayal. They felt that Moore's role made a mockery of the Bond character and weakened the image they had worked hard to build. After the film's release, MGM reportedly took action to prevent similar situations in the future. They issued a rule that no current or future Bond actors could take part in spoof versions of the character or appear in comedies that made fun of the spy image. What was meant to be a light-hearted role ended up changing the rules for an entire franchise. The mixture of regret, confusion, and unexpected brilliance among the cast reflected the spirit of the Cannonball Run as a whole. It was a movie driven more by energy than structure, more by charisma than careful planning. Some actors didn't understand what kind of movie they were making. Others joined at the last minute, and a few simply improvised their way through the production. Despite that, or maybe because of it, the film worked. The director, Hal Needham, understood that a rigid approach wouldn't suit the film's tone. Instead, he encouraged actors to be themselves, to improvise, and to respond naturally to whatever happened on set. That freedom allowed for real chemistry to develop, even among performers who had never worked together before. In a traditional film, this approach might have led to disaster, but in the Cannonball run, it created something unique. By the time filming wrapped, it was clear that this wasn't going to be a typical action comedy. It was messy, unpredictable, and full of moments that could only happen when a group of actors are left to have fun with their roles. The fact that it all came together is something of a small miracle. One of the most tragic stories linked to the making of the Cannonball Run involves stuntwoman Heidi von Beltz. At just 24 years old, she was an up-and-coming talent in the world of stunt work. Her career was only just beginning when she was brought in for a scene involving a high-speed car sequence. She was riding as a passenger in an Aston Martin when things went terribly wrong. The car had known mechanical issues, but filming continued regardless. More crucially, it didn't have proper seat belts installed. During the stunt, the car collided with a van. Von Beltz was thrown forward, suffering a broken neck that left her paralyzed from the neck down. The accident was shocking, not only for its severity, but also for how easily it could have been prevented. The incident shed light on how lax safety procedures were at the time, especially when it came to stunts and action sequences. Up to that point, many productions had taken a relaxed approach to safety, often cutting corners to save time or money. Seat belts were sometimes overlooked, vehicles weren't always properly inspected, and if a stunt looked good on camera, few people questioned what risks had been taken to capture it. Heidi's accident forced the industry to face some uncomfortable truths. In the months and years that followed, Hollywood began to implement stricter rules. One of the first major changes was the requirement that all stunt vehicles be fitted with functioning seat belts. Studios also began listening more closely to warnings from stunt coordinators, giving them more authority to halt scenes if they felt something was unsafe. These changes may not have undone the damage done to von Beltz, but they helped protect countless others from similar injuries. While the Cannonball Run carried the spirit of reckless fun on screen, it came with a cost. Heidi von Beltz's story serves as a reminder that behind every car chase and stunt, real people were taking real risks. Her life was changed forever, and the impact of that crash still echoes in today's film safety protocols. Alongside the physical risks, there were also cultural missteps, some of which deeply affected the people involved. Jackie Chan made his American film debut in the Cannonball Run. Already a major star in Asia, Chan was known for combining martial arts, physical comedy, and innovative stunts in a way that was unlike anyone else in the business. His role in the film was meant to showcase some of that talent, but the final result didn't live up to expectations. In the film, Jackie played one half of a high-tech racing duo driving a Japanese car. While he did perform some martial arts moves, many of his best scenes were either cut entirely or trimmed down in the editing room. The reasoning was that the intense action clashed with the film's light comedic tone. But in doing so, the film stripped away what made Chan unique. Rather than introducing him properly to American audiences, the movie presented him as a generic side character. He moved home to the military homeworld, setting up a journalism career. To make matters worse, the credits mistakenly listed him as Japanese. For Jackie Chan, a proud Chinese actor, this wasn't just an oversight. It was an insult. At a time when Asian representation in Hollywood was already limited and often mishandled, being misidentified in such a high-profile film added to the frustration. Instead of walking away, Chan used the experience as motivation. He realized that if he wanted Hollywood to see his full potential, he'd need to take more control over the roles he accepted and the kind of projects he worked on. This decision eventually led him to major hits like Rumble in the Bronx and Rush Hour, where he had far more creative input and was able to blend his signature style of action and comedy on his own terms. What started as a disappointment ended up being a turning point in his international career. Representation wasn't the only issue facing the film. The way it was made, often on the fly and with little planning, also created its own set of problems. The script for the Cannonball Run was famously loose. Actors have since admitted that scenes were often written or changed just minutes before filming. Farrah Fawcett even claimed that she never saw a full script. Instead, she was handed pages on the day and expected to keep up. This kind of production style created plenty of confusion. Scenes were improvised, dialogue was rewritten on the spot, and the overall structure of the film seemed to shift constantly. But for some actors, this unpredictability was part of the fun. Director Hal Needham liked to work with instinct. He believed that spontaneity could create magic on camera, something that overly rehearsed performances couldn't deliver. That approach wasn't without its challenges. Continuity errors appeared throughout the film, plot threads were dropped or never fully explained, and some performances varied wildly in tone from scene to scene. But the energy of the film, fast, chaotic, and slightly unhinged, mirrored the way it was made. In a strange way, the lack of structure gave the film its unique charm. One of the clearest examples of this improvised, chaotic style came from Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr., who often ignored the script entirely. Their scenes as two fake priests were filled with off-the-cuff jokes, physical comedy, and moments that were never planned. According to reports from the crew, much of what made it into the final cut was improvised while the cameras were rolling. They weren't just acting relaxed, they were actually drinking during filming. The glasses of alcohol in their hands weren't props, and their slurred lines weren't part of the performance. For many directors, this would be a red flag, but Needham let it happen, believing that their natural chemistry would be more entertaining than anything written in the script. And in many ways, he was right. The unfiltered humor and unpredictable energy of their scenes remain some of the most memorable parts of the movie. Dom DeLuise also brought a level of spontaneity that was both a blessing and a challenge. Known for his infectious laugh and physical comedy, DeLuise often couldn't keep a straight face during filming. In the industry, this is called corpsing, when an actor breaks character and laughs in the middle of a scene. DeLuise did it so often that some of his co-stars, including Burt Reynolds, started reacting to it in character just to keep the scene going. Those real reactions, Reynolds rolling his eyes, DeLuise giggling uncontrollably, were sometimes kept in the final edit. In many ways, they added a sense of realism to the film. Viewers could tell the cast was genuinely enjoying themselves, and that feeling was contagious. But it also meant that scenes had to be reshot multiple times, and editing became more complicated than it might have been with a more disciplined cast. Despite all the challenges, or maybe because of them, the Cannonball run found success. The film captured something that audiences responded to, not just the fast cars or big names, but the sense that anything could happen. Whether it was Jackie Chan using the moment to launch a new career path, or Dean Martin showing up to set already half in character, the unpredictable nature of the production translated into a film that felt alive and unfiltered. One of the more surprising areas where the film left its mark was in the world of video games. In the mid-1980s, the arcade scene was booming, and developers were looking for fresh ideas that could tap into what young audiences found exciting. In 1986, Sega released Outrun, a driving game that quickly became a sensation. Players took the wheel of a red Ferrari, accompanied by a female passenger, racing across exotic landscapes while dodging traffic and trying to beat the clock. What made Outrun stand out wasn't just its gameplay or graphics, but its atmosphere. It wasn't structured like a traditional racing game with laps and strict rules. Instead, it felt like a road trip powered by speed, freedom, and style. According to the game's designer, Yu Suzuki, that was exactly the goal. He wanted players to feel like they were on an adventure, not just competing in a race. That sense of carefree speed and glamour was directly inspired by the tone set in the Cannonball run. The film's influence wasn't limited to digital entertainment. On set, there were moments where even the crew and producers struggled to tell who was who. Burt Reynolds was, of course, one of the most recognizable faces in Hollywood at the time. But his stunt double, Roy Tatum, looked so much like him that it caused genuine confusion during production. Tatum not only handled some of the driving and action scenes, but also had a small acting role as a police officer in one scene. The resemblance between Reynolds and Tatum was so strong that extras and even members of the production team occasionally mistook one for the other. Tatum had worked with Reynolds before and had not just the same build and look, but also picked up on his mannerisms and swagger. On a set full of improvisation and chaos, having someone who could step in so seamlessly helped keep things moving, and added to the film's behind-the-scenes legend. Another unexpected addition to the film came in the form of a very expensive piece of personal property. Director Hal Needham, a former stuntman who believed in doing things the hard and fast way, decided that his own Ferrari 308 GTS would appear in the film. This wasn't a studio car or a replica, it was his actual car, used during some of the high-speed driving sequences. At one point, the Ferrari came dangerously close to being destroyed but Needham wasn't the kind of director to panic about a few scratches. For him, the risk was worth it if it added authenticity to the action. His willingness to use his own car reflected the film's no-holds-barred approach to production. Despite all the chaos on set, late script changes, unpredictable actors, and improvised scenes, studio executives began to notice something interesting. As the dailies came in, showing the raw footage shot each day, it became clear that the cast had genuine chemistry. The performances, even when unplanned, were magnetic. There was a kind of unfiltered energy that couldn't be faked. The laughs felt real, and the fun translated directly to the screen. Executives were so confident in what they were seeing that they gave the green light for a sequel before the first film was even finished. That kind of early approval is almost unheard of in Hollywood, especially for a film that looked so unpredictable on paper. But the bet paid off. The Cannonball run became a box office hit and eventually spawned a follow-up film, continuing the tradition of fast cars and outrageous characters. Among the details that helped make the film stand out were the many cameos. Quick, often uncredited appearances by familiar faces. These blink-and-you-miss-it moments added another layer of charm to the film. One early cameo featured Valerie Perrine, best known for her role as Miss Teschmacher in Superman 1978. She appeared as a state trooper during a high-speed chase at the beginning of the film. Though she wasn't listed in the credits, fans who recognized her enjoyed the surprise. Another brief appearance came from Ken Squier, the legendary NASCAR commentator, known as the voice of the Daytona 500. He showed up as a California Highway Patrol officer in one scene. For motorsports fans, his inclusion brought a level of racing credibility to a film otherwise known for playing things fast and loose. His presence was a subtle nod to the real racing community that had inspired the original Cannonball events. Perhaps the most fitting cameo, though, belonged to Peter Fonda. Fonda, who had starred in Easy Rider, another film about freedom on the open road, made a short appearance as himself, leading a biker gang. It was a small moment, but it connected the rebellious spirit of the Cannonball Run to an earlier generation of countercultural road films. His cameo wasn't just for laughs. It was a reminder that this film, for all its silliness, was part of a much larger conversation about individualism, speed, and the American obsession with the open highway. In addition to these cameos, the Cannonball Run also helped popularize a now common movie tradition, the end-credit blooper reel. Today, it's almost expected that a comedy will feature behind-the-scenes footage or outtakes during the credits. But in 1981, this was still relatively rare. As the credits rolled on the Cannonball Run, audiences were treated to clips of the cast messing up lines, laughing during takes, and breaking character. It gave the film a sense of warmth and camaraderie that extended beyond the story. The bloopers quickly became a fan favorite. Viewers stayed in their seats waiting to see the actors crack up or forget their lines. It made the entire experience feel more personal and fun, as though the audience was being let in on a private joke. One person particularly inspired by this approach was Jackie Chan. After seeing how well the bloopers worked, he began including his own outtakes at the end of his future films. In movies like Police Story and Rush Hour, the end-credit bloopers became part of the appeal, showing Chan's commitment to his stunts and giving audiences a chance to see what really happened during those action-packed scenes. Not everything about the film's wild energy stayed within safe limits. One of the most dangerous and legally questionable stunts in the movie involved a low-flying Learjet. The plane soared just above the ground, creating an impressive shot, but it was done without proper clearance from the Federal Aviation Administration. The filmmakers hadn't secured the right permits and chose to go ahead with the stunt anyway, hoping no one would notice. But people did notice, and the FAA launched an investigation after the film was released. It was a stark reminder that even in a comedy, pushing boundaries can come with serious consequences. Despite all these risks, or maybe because of them, The Cannonball Run remains a film that feels alive and unfiltered. Its lasting influence can be seen in the way filmmakers take risks, in how video games are designed, and in the kinds of extras we now expect during movie credits. The film captured a mood and a moment, one where not everything had to be polished to perfection, and where chaos could sometimes produce something genuinely entertaining. What started as a loosely organized shoot, driven more by energy than planning, ended up creating a legacy that stretched far beyond what anyone expected. Whether it was inspiring arcade classics, changing how actors are credited, or introducing the idea of bloopers as part of the fun, The Cannonball Run made its mark in ways that are still being felt today. For a film that never set out to be a landmark, it somehow became one. A celebration of speed, humor, spontaneity, and rule-breaking, it stands as proof that even the most chaotic productions can produce something unforgettable, especially when everyone involved is having a genuinely good time.